Yeah, y'all enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
I'll see you, Denise.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
People might find it hard to believe that school teachers in Northwest Arkansas fit into the ALICE community. ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained. Who has a second job delivering groceries to supplement her income.
Somebody early 30s, mid-30s with a master's degree, but it's another person who should be struggling, who should be going out and delivering groceries.
Starting salaries for school teachers in Bentonville are a little over $54,000. The housing prices in the area have continued to increase because of business development. The ALICE population includes households that earn above the federal poverty level but struggle to afford the basics where they live, which is prompting some teachers to move out of the district or quit their jobs. Hickey says the Fayetteville City Council recently declared a housing crisis.
We're also seeing these soaring housing costs. The Washington Post wrote the story, said that rent prices in Benton County had risen 34.6% since 2019. And each of those countries is not keeping up with that.
The Bentonville School District had secured grant money to build 100 homes on school property for teachers, but the zoning request was denied by the Bentonville City Council. This story was produced with original reporting from Jordan Hickey with the Arkansas Advocate. I'm Frida Ross, Arkansas News Service. Find our trust indicators at publicnewsservice.org.
For many servicemen and women, the battle doesn't end when they come home. And I know, because I too struggle with the invisible wounds of service. Pups for Patriots and Sam literally changed my life. If you're a veteran or know a veteran struggling with post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury, go to AmericanHumane.org to learn more about the Pups for Patriots Service Dog Program. Let's give our veterans a fighting chance.
A message from American Humane.
Hey everybody, it's Larry Hicks. Be sure to tune in next Monday, December 5th, for another edition of Let's Talk About It, when our special guest will be Keisha Smith, Arkansas advocate for families and children and the services that they provide in order to help them meet good living standards. That's all next Monday, right here on KABF FM 88.3. We are the voice of the people.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I hope everybody's having a great Thursday morning so far. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there that celebrate Thanksgiving or whatever tradition you're having you celebrate today. Just wanted to thank you. Yeah, appreciate you taking the time to listen in this morning to the workplace here on KABF 88.3 FM, where we are the voice of the people. I'm your host for the workplace, Toney Orr, and as always in the house, in the studio, is the Reverend Dr. Denise Darnell, my vivacious, beautiful co-host.
Grand Rising, good humans.
Okay, you know I haven't been on the air in a minute. It
You was
seems
just on the air Tuesday
well.
and Wednesday.
I'm talking about for the workplace. For the workplace, I haven't did my show in a minute, and I think it's at least 2 weeks that I haven't did the show, and so it's just kind of weird. I know I've been on the other side, the console as a co-host or as a guest, but it's been a minute since I've been actually behind the mic, so. It's kind of like a weird feeling in a way, but hey, it is great to be back. I've been traveling the Netherlands, Amsterdam, Hurling, the Netherlands, and Berlin, Germany, and it's been a great experience. But it's good to be back here at KABF 88.3 FM. Just want to thank all of you once again for taking time out of your morning to tune in to the show. We really appreciate all the efforts and all the work that you put in for KABF 88.3, whether through your donations, whether you're showing up for events, or whether you're just volunteering in any way possible. We really appreciate it, and we give you thanks for all that you do. So before we go any farther, I'm going to give my co-host, Denise, the opportunity to greet you and see if she has any announcements.
I don't have any announcements.
Okay, so I have one announcement. It is from Our Best, and it said, attention, Our Best customers. Protect your debit card like never before with Our Best fraud alerts. Here's how it works. If suspicious activity is detected, Our Best sends you a text alert. Reply yes to confirm the transaction or no if it's fraudulent. It's fast, easy, and keeps your card safe. Learn more about this powerful protection at ourbest.com/fraud alerts. That's ourbest.com /fraud alerts. Our best fraud alerts, keeping you one step ahead of fraud. And personally, I'm going to tell you something, to say this to everyone. If you have a credit card or a debit card and you don't have that fraud alert, you need to get it. The one thing I love is when I'm traveling or I'm doing things, and if I buy something or I purchase something or do something, and it's kind of out of the norm, I will get an alert on my phone. Say, hey, is this you? And sometimes I get a phone call. Hey, Mr. Orr, we noticed that your card was used, and in fact, when I was in Amsterdam, I got that call. He said, that said, hey, we noticed that your card was being used in this place, this shop in Amsterdam. Is that, did you make that purchase? And I said, yes. And they said, okay, what we'll do is, how long are you going to be there? And I told them, and they said, okay, we're going to make sure that this is noted. So any other transactions, because if you don't, your card can be frozen. They will freeze your account and you won't be able to use that card. So it's something good to have. It may be annoying at times, but it's great to have. And so this morning, just want to talk to the listening audience about this, about Thanksgiving. And so yesterday on Pat Ward's show, Arkansas Talks, she asked me, I was passing through by the studio, and she asked me to sit in on her show just as a guest. And we were talking about not so much Thanksgiving, but we were talking about the traditions. We were talking about some of the things that we remember. And so that kind of stuck with me. And so I mentioned before that I had my 87-year-old aunt living with me from Chicago. And last night we were just talking, and she reminded me, say, you know, do you remember Thanksgiving 10 years ago? And I had to think, and I said, yeah, I do. I said, you know, you were here 10 years ago. And she started talking about the wonderful time we had. And and from that Thanksgiving, for about 5 or 6 years, we had this tradition that for Thanksgiving, that her and my other aunts, and that first Thanksgiving that she was there, you know, I invited all my living aunts and uncles to come to my house. I just bought the house, and I wanted them to come and just uh, just share with me the house and everything, and they all came. And so for about 5 or 6 years, we began this tradition of them coming to my house for Thanksgiving. And then as slowly, you know, as they started to transition from this life, you know, now it's just my aunt. And as she was just reminiscing about that time we both were, you know, we started thinking about all the things that our childhood, you know, just so many different stories. And so one of the things at the end, you know, she asked me, so what is going to be, after I leave, what's going to be tradition? What tradition are you going to establish? What are you going to establish with your family? What are you going to establish with your children? And that's one thing that Pat brought up yesterday, is that when are we going to start establishing our own traditions? When are we going to start looking at traditions that will help the family, that will help our community? And that was one of the other things we talked about yesterday, was that there is a fracture in our communities. You know, there is this, when we were talking about that when we were kids, and she talked about her childhood as I talked about mine, is how the whole neighborhood, you know, came together as a community. And just wondering, you know, like I said, what traditions would, you know, are you establishing? But more importantly, what traditions in the community are you establishing to create a better unity with the community and the neighborhood you live in? So that's the question. You know, that's the question on the table this morning. So phone lines are open 501 433 0088, 501 433 0088. What do you think about Denise? And what traditions did you and your family establish or have?
I think everybody who knows me knows I'm not interested in establishing any traditions around the holidays, so I don't have anything to say about that.
Okay. And so when you start talking about these traditions, you know, and it doesn't necessarily, to me, it doesn't necessarily mean it's about Thanksgiving or about any holiday. But what traditions can you start? You know, I think about the movie Soul Food, and where they had this tradition of meeting on Sundays for food, you know, for gathering. What, you know, what can we do? What can we do to start? And it doesn't have to be a holiday. It could be just, you know, every Wednesday, you know, get together with community. Every Tuesday, you get together with family. The great thing that I enjoyed last night was that I had so many of my cousins who live in Arkansas were at my house, and had some friends at my house, and just the joy, you know, talking about what we can, you know, what we can do going forward with our children, what we can do going forward with our finances, what we can do going forward with our political ideas and views, and and I don't know if I've ever had that before, because normally when and we were talking about this Tuesday on Community Voices, is when you start talking about your politics, and even when you start talking about your religious belief, it can become personal, and people's feelings get in the way, and then nothing moves forward. And last night, it was it was centered around my aunt, but it was also centered around so many other things, because my aunt um, was just emphasizing, that she talked about what her legacy would be. She talked about, we did, the things we did as children, when we're younger, but what are you going to do going forward? What are you going to do to help maintain the family? What are you going to do? What type of legacy are you going to leave? And I thought that was important in that conversation, because legacy is very important to my aunt. Being the last aunt on my mother's side, the last sibling on my mother's side, it was very important to her that she leaves something tangible to us, something that we can take and we can grow on, something that we can build on, something that we can move forward on. And I thought that was so unique, that that's one of the things that she wanted to lead. And so, what are what are you leaving for your family? What are you leaving for your children? What are you leaving for your community? What are you establishing to make sure that things move forward and not backwards? Can you comment? And so it's just something to think about, when we start to look at where our families, where our communities, where it's going. What is it that we need to do? I opened my show up with this song, "We Got Work to Do." So what work do we have to do when I know we look at, we'll look at a day like today, and we think about the food, we think about so many other things, but in those moments, are we doing anything that will help solidify our families? I was having a conversation with Denise about a week ago, more than a week ago, and just talking about when I was a kid, how we just went from house to house to eat, and I had to rethink the conversation, because in my mind at that moment, as we were talking about it, I was like, hey, it was just eating. It was just, it wasn't about, it wasn't so much about the food, because, we just ate. But then I had to rethink, and a lot of it had to do with what was going on at my house with my aunt, last night, is food may have been the thing that brought us together, but it was everything else that flowed from that became more significant and more powerful. And like I said, going back to, what type of legacy, you know, going back to going backwards in time and coming forward and thinking about some of the things that uh, transpired, some of the attitudes, uh, um, some of the things that were in a way, detrimental to our family. Some of the things that tore our family down instead of lifted our family up. And the more we talked about it, and I think the great thing coming out of the conversations was the fact that nobody took it personal. We were able to say, you know what, that's right. That did affect us in a certain way. That did, chart a different course of our lives. And how do we bring that back? How do we come back to that point where we can say, you know what, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. Maybe that wasn't a good choice. Maybe I got caught up in this or got caught up in that. And so in these conversations, it made you stop and think, and realize that, you know what, in this moment, I have this opportunity to, you know, to chart a different course. I have this opportunity to change the thoughts of, help change the thoughts of my community, help change the thoughts of my family, to help uh, establish something a little different, help establish something a little better. And so it was so it was so uh, it was so inspiring. It was so inspiring, and I'm just thinking, how many other families are going to do that today? How many other families are going to sit, and talk about, what can we do as a family? What can we do as a community? What can we do? Since we are all here, since we are all gathered together, where can we go? What work can we do to make things better? What can we teach our children? What can we do uh, to establish a legacy? What can we do to stop some of the things that we had embodied, and have been detrimental to our families and our communities? So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the continuation of these conversations. And I think everybody left, the ones that did leave, I still have some people sleeping at the house, or, staying at the house. But it's going to be uh, fun and exciting to continue these conversations and see what we come up with. To see, uh, uh, can we save, those behind us? Can we um, be able to put them on, give them some information that can help them on their journey? Can we give them some information that will help educate them, bring knowledge to them? Can we give them information that will have them stand strong and have them become who they need to be in order to push forward this world? And I think that's going to be a great conversation for me and my family. And it's just wondering, are those going to be conversations like that in your family today? Or is it just going to be about food, football, and playing cards and other stuff? Nothing, and don't get me wrong, it's nothing wrong with any of that. But are there going to be any serious conversations? I think sometimes when we think about the holidays, I think we don't want to get in serious conversations. But I think it's an opportunity that, because you had so many people there, it could be an opportunity to move the needle, as they say, to come up with some ideas, to come up with a game plan, to come up with some ideas for finances, to come up with some ideas about education, to come up with some ideas about uh, where as I said, where you're going to go forward as a family. And so it's going to be, I think it's important that we have these conversations. I think sometimes these conversations become very tense at times, contentious at times. I think these conversations become difficult because one of the things that I had a cousin say last night is that, you know, this is, you know, this is what I think and this is what I believe. And I don't know if I can move past that. But as the conversation went forward, you know, it became evident that my cousin said, you know, it is something to think about. And I think sometimes that's where I think a lot of people get lost at, is that um, just think about it. Just think about certain things. Just think about this thing instead of this continuously to fight back. I know personally, you know, I have been one that I would be like, nah, this is what I think, this is what I believe, this is what I stand on, and I'm not moving. You know, so I'm not trying to consider, I'm not trying to think about it, I'm not trying to engage in it, you know. And then I had to be, you know, then I had to have a shift. And I had to start, okay, if I close myself off to other ideas or other information, then I'm keeping myself in a box. So if I listen, and it doesn't mean that you have to embrace a new idea. It doesn't mean that you have to uh, uh, change whatever it is that you believe or you think, but just the fact that it could be something that you can think about that may help facilitate a growth in you, that may facilitate something better in you. And I think at the end of the day, that's one of the things we miss out on as a community and in this world is that uh, this when you don't do it, you lock yourself in. And I think there are a lot of people who are locked into one state of mind. And if you can unlock your mind, what's the song? So free your mind and the rest will follow. You know, sometimes it's a difficult thing for us to free our mind.
We do have got Pat Rogers Ward right here joining us today. Hey, Pat Rogers
Hey,
Ward.
Pat.
She said Happy Turkey Day to those of you who are listening. So I am interested in that conversation, the conversation about what traditions we need to divest from. I'm not interested in talking about traditions that we need to create around these holidays. I'm not interested in that at all. But we're going to talk about what we need to stop doing, the traditions that we have in our family, the traditions that we have in our community that are continuing to harm us, that are continuing to traumatize us, that are continuing to leave a legacy of terror for our children. Like, let's talk about that. And so I'm reading a book right now that's called They Were Her Property. And it is about white women who were slave owners during the during the time of enslavement, chattel enslavement. And one of the things that they talk about is how the slave masters did not want to be the ones who inflicted harm on the people that were enslaved. For the most part, they wanted somebody else to do that so that they could continue to have this air of they didn't want the people who were enslaved to see them as terroristic. They didn't want them to see them as those that would inflict harm or that would kill them, that would hurt them. They really wanted to have a better relationship with the people that they were enslaving so that they could get better performance out of them. That's basically what it was. And so I started thinking about how much violence is in the home, especially when I think about the Black family, because I am Black. I can only speak about on a real level what I know about my own community is that we have a lot of violence in our homes. And a lot of times when we think about our children who grow up to be victims of domestic violence, and we wonder, how did they get into this? How did they allow themselves to be in this kind of relationship? Like, where did this come from? And it's because we grow up in violence. As Black folks, we believe it's like a part of our culture that we whip our children and we execute corporal punishment upon them. And that means putting our hands on them in order to discipline them and keep them in line. So if we want to have conversations about traditions within our community, I think we need to talk about the ones that are really affecting us on a deeper level and figure out ways that we can stop that we can change these cycles, that we can educate our children around different ways of growing up and raising their own children. Like, how do we get them to rethink their own experiences in their homes? homes. That's what I think is more important. And I wonder why we have to wait for holidays to have these conversations. Like if we're gonna have these conversations that are real talk about real change in our real families that affect our real lives, then we shouldn't have to wait for Thanksgiving or Christmas to have the conversation. We should make it a point to schedule these conversations on a regular basis, because I think that would be much more helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, and that's why when I was talking about the conversations that were going on last night and the conversations that will continue today, is getting to that point. The one thing that my aunt was saying last night, and she said, and when she said this, you could tell the hurt, and you could tell the tears in her, she had tears in her eyes, because she admitted, she said, there's some things that I did because, when it came to uh, being raising all of you, because at some point in time, all of us, flowed through my this particular aunt's house, and she said that I made some grave mistakes. I did some things that I did because it was done to me, and it was probably done to my mother and my father, and and so it. I did the same thing. And because I was so closed off, that nobody couldn't tell me that, you were wrong to do this, or even that, hey, you may want to try a different way, because it went against what the community or the family thought. And so in this conversation last night, one of the things that we talked about, said, what can we do differently? What can we do better? How do we change from what we are used to and what we have been experiencing and what we feel is the right thing, and open our minds to a new thing, to open our minds to something different? And I know that becomes difficult for a lot of people. And also it opens the door for to say that, you know what, hey, why don't we start meeting? And there was something one of my what I think it would be my great nephew. I think that's how it would be. It was one of the things that he said. He said. He said, it's fascinating sitting here listening to all of you talk about the history of the family and everything. And he said that it would be great. It would be great that that we can come as younger nephews and younger family members and just sit. And they were like, Auntie, we're going to come back. We're coming back next weekend. And we just want to spend time talking to you, telling us the history and the story of the family. And I think that's, and I agree with you, Denise, that's very important, because that's when the new ideas start to form. That's when the new traditions start to form. That's when the new attitudes start to form. I am one of the world's worst when it comes to, you can call it old school, you can call it being stubborn, you can call it not being tech savvy or whatever. I resist it. Even though it may be something that's good for me, even though it may be something to make me better, I resist it. And so I'm doing a lot of thinking of why I resist it. Is it fear? Is it, what is it? Is it that I'm so used to being comfortable in a certain way or dealing with a certain thing? And because I don't want to get out that comfortability, is that it? And I think that was part of the conversations we were having last night, is that there are some things we are just comfortable with. There are some things that we are, as you said, we just cool with, or, we look at it like, well, it is what it is, instead of reassessing it, and saying, well, is this a good thing? And so
Here's a comment for you. Here's a question for you from Ramen. Toney, do you have violence in your Black home?
in my home,
He says black because I said I made a point of saying that I believe that as black folks, it's almost cultural that we have violence in our home because we execute, we exact corporal punishment on our children. So I made it a point of saying that I believe that's what happens in the majority of black homes. And so he's asking you, do you have violence in your black home?
I said it this way. Now I don't, but at one time I did. Going back to what I said earlier, is that that's what I was taught, and that's what I thought was the best way. So yes, I disciplined my children until I got to a point where I realized this may not be the right way. This may not be the right thing to do. This is more of a detriment. And I started thinking, did I want my children to, when they started having children, to do the same thing that I did? So yes, at one point, there was violence in my home. And as far as when it came to discipline my children, I want to, make that straight. When it came to discipline my children, if whooping them is considered violence, then yes. But do I have that violence in my home now?
You said
No.
if whipping is considered violence. So do you consider that violence?
My no.
So here's a message from Deidre. She sent this meme that says Thanksgiving, celebrating all we have and the genocide it took to get it. Thanksgiving, celebrating all we have and the genocide it took to get it. So we don't want people to get twisted about the myth, the lie that we've been taught about Thanksgiving, where the Indians and the Pilgrims sat down because it was this great kumbaya moment where they were breaking bread together and having a wonderful time. That is not what Thanksgiving, that is not what was happening during the time that people who were First Nation folks were being forcibly removed. They were being slaughtered. They were being raped. They were being stripped of all of their goods and their resources and their talents and their gifts. We don't want to get that twisted. And so Deidre sent that meme. And when you were talking about your great nephew who said he wanted to come and sit at the feet of your aunt so that they can talk more about the family and to learn more about the family, I do hope that you all will take some time to also listen to the stories that the great nephews and the great nieces and whoever it is that shows up have to share. Because when you ask me if whipping is violence as a child who was on the receiving end of the whipping, of the corporal punishment, I can absolutely tell you that yes, it is violent. And so for you to hear the stories of what that's like, the impact of someone when you have a parent who says how much they love you and then they turn around and beat you and you're trying to figure this out, like how does that work? And so it's important for you to listen to the stories of the people that are impacted by the discipline that you say is not violence, because the way you look at it, it's not, but the way that they receive it, I believe many of them will tell you that it absolutely is.
Yeah, and the one thing that as a family, and this goes back several years. As a family, one thing that we have tried and we're continually working on is listening to the younger generation, because they have a voice and there's a lot of things they want to say. And the one thing that I said earlier is that we have to take our feelings out of some things, because a lot of times when that younger generation start talking about some things that happened to them, some things that were that happened to them, some of the things that we as parents and we as the older generation put on them, we start to get, we can, the older generation can get a little testy with it, and they try to come up with a justification of it instead of just listening to what that younger generation is saying, and then being able to admit. And that's what I one of the things I took away from my aunt last night is that she was able to look at us and admit, hey, I was wrong. You know, this is something I shouldn't have done. This is something I could have did better. I could have listened. I could have did other things. I could have, set you down and talked to you instead of doing this. And so, yes, I agree. We have to listen and we have to own. We have to own some things as parents, as ancestors, of the younger generation, that we have to admit and own that, hey, this was something that may not have been the best. This may not have been my finest moment. I could have done something better. And sometimes we'll say, well, that's all I knew. And that's fine if that's all you knew. But when something new was being told to you and you refuse to even consider it, going back to something I said before, then it can be problematic because it's just not you that's rejecting it, but it will affect other people. And so it's something that we have to think about, and it's something that we have to talk about.
I don't know how fruitful the conversation is going to be if you have been the one who has demonstrated the behavior that another person think is violent, and you yourself don't believe that it's violent. So if the person says, well, I think this is violent, you say, well, I don't think it's violent, then I'm not sure how fruitful the conversation can be. And so when we talk about getting together to have conversations with our family, I think sometimes it's important that it's a structured conversation where we have someone in there, whether it's a member of the family or a third party, who can help us understand the art of conversation, the art of listening, the art of making sure that we know that a disagreement, that an argument doesn't mean that you have to get all up in your feelings and get ready to fight and be all upset, but that it is an exchange of ideas and information. And the whole purpose is to make sure that you are open to it. And just to say that you are open to it is not the same as being open to it, because it is a practice that we have to learn to be open to hearing somebody else's ideas and to be able to engage those ideas in a way that could lead to change. They may not, but it could. But you have to position yourself in that way. And that's difficult to do if A, you don't know how to do it, and B, you're not willing to do it.
Yeah, I can agree. I think the biggest thing from just with me and what was going on with my family last night, and like I said, what will continue to go on today, is the fact that it was a starting point. And sometimes you have to get to a starting point. If you don't enter into the race, you can never start the race. And you can never finish it. And so it comes a point where you have to be willing to step into, let me step into this. And this is the starting point. It's not about how fast you get there. It's not about how slow you get there. It's about trying to get there. And I think, like I said, going back to my aunt, I think she's at a point where she's looking at the totality of our family. She's looking at the effects of certain things that happen from the older generation that has affected this younger generation. And I think with her, she's looking at, if I don't do anything else, what can I do to help correct this? What can I do to help change the course of even the future generations that are on the way? What can I do? What can I say? How can I change the minds or change the thought process of everybody from me going downward? And I think that's one of the things that you have to look at, and I think that's something that sometimes we have to stop and say, you know what, this is our starting point. This is the seed that may manifest and grow into something better for our family, better for our community, better for all of us around. And then in the future, or then we're able to handle certain things differently in the future. We're able to look at things differently. We're able to look at how we're going to teach our children, how we're going to educate our children, what are we going to instill in our children, how we're going to make sure that our children are going to be able to stand strong in the face of this society adversity that they're going to face a lot of times. So, he is the starting point. And so I think it's very important that on some level, like I said, we start, no matter how difficult, no matter, as you said, Denise, no matter what the different ideas you have, no matter what the different beliefs you have, no matter what is going on, you have to be able to step towards and say, you know what, here's the opportunity for change. Here's the opportunity for something different.
I want to say to those of us who have experienced relationships with our family members that have led us to choose other folks to be our family that don't have anything to do with blood. I do want to honor you at this time, because a lot of times when we talk about holidays, that is a difficult time for some folks. It is a depressing time for some folks. It is a very emotional time for some folks, because we have been in relationships with our families where violence has separated us, where differences of opinions have separated us, where identity labels that the world has given us, where religion has separated us. And it's times like these where we feel lonely, we feel separated, we feel like we are not as loved as we would have wanted to be, particularly by our family of origin. And so I just want to just honor you and let you know that I see you. And I do hope that you will be able to find some support, and you will be able to surround yourself with some people who actually support you and just love you for who you are. Rama says, shout out to the Black homes free of violence. We are not a monolith. Absolutely. Shout out to the Black homes free of violence. I hope that you will raise up in a conversation like this, those of you who did not grow up with violence in your homes, because when people are having that conversation and everybody in the conversation grew up in violence, they need to hear stories of how it looks, how it works, how you can experience a family where that is not the norm, that is not perceived as the norm. And so absolutely, I appreciate you saying that, Rama. Shout out to the Black homes free of violence. We are not a monolith.
Yes, and that's a great statement, Ron. Because we do have to take the violence out of our homes. When you look at our neighborhoods, you look at what's going on in our communities. It's violence, and so understanding violence and trying to move past it. It can be a difficult thing. And I think the most difficult thing could be maybe just understanding it, And so those are conversations, those are dialogues that we must have if we're going to move forward in a better way. And that's the work. That's the work we have to do. And you have to be able to put the work in. You have to be willing to put the work in. You have to try to put the work in. You have to do your due diligence in that work. And it doesn't mean, because I think one of the things that came up in one of the conversations last night, is that a lot of times when people feel like, that something is said and they don't agree with it, or they feel like they're wrong. They feel like someone said, well, I did, I'm wrong. And I don't think it's so much that a person was wrong. I think it goes back to something I said earlier. It's that if you're not willing to open up your mind to the idea or consider it, whether it changes your mind or not, I think that's when your feelings get in the way. And it's a difficult thing to remove your feelings.
But sometimes you are wrong, and that's part of the problem. People cannot accept the fact that sometimes you are absolutely positively wrong. And when somebody says it to you, then sometimes you just have to stop and say, well, you know what? That's true. I am right. You said it yourself. Your aunt has said it. She has admitted that. And so until we are able to admit it, until we are able to acknowledge it, again, the conversation is not going to be fruitful because you're not in a position to receive the benefit of the conversation because you're so busy worried about somebody calling you wrong. You were wrong, period. And that happens to all of us. As humans, we will be wrong at some point. And that should be something that we're willing to admit.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying is that you have to get to a point where, even when you take your feelings out the way and you stop and think, say, okay, I am wrong. But a lot of times in that moment, you're not able to do that. In that moment.
Well, I was responding to you saying, well, I don't even want to think about it as being that you're wrong. I don't even want to say that it's you're being wrong. So that's what I was responding to. And I'm saying, yes, we need to say that you are wrong and that you need to be able to own that and to accept that, because only when you name it are you able to control it. So when you're able to look at yourself and say, I'm wrong, then you can take the steps to make a difference. Then you can take the steps to say, let me change. Then you can take the steps to say, I want to be different. I want to move in a different way. Until you're able to say that, I don't see what's gonna be different about I don't see how the conversation is gonna make a change if you're not willing to do that work.
Yeah, and what I was saying is that you have to look at both sides of the coin. So if a person doesn't feel like they're wrong, then they can't change. But if that person can stop for a second and just think about what was said and think about their own complicity, in whatever the conversation is, and thinking about, what, maybe I am wrong. And that's one of the most difficult things to do for a lot of people is to, accept. And an example for me is one of my aunts who has transitioned when I had went to the army, and I came back, and we were just in a conversation, and I asked the question, why did you do this when when I was this age? Why did you do this?
Why was she violent towards you?
No,
it wasn't violent.
No. And the first thing she did was raise up and say, you don't question me about what I did. I did what I did. Excuse me. And don't you, because to her, I'm still this 12, 13, 14-year-old kid instead of being a 23-year-old man, adult, And so it was like, you're challenging me, you child. And, and she could not understand in that moment why I was asking the question, because that incident affected me later on in life. It affected me, it affected my life. But some years later, she came back and she apologized. She said, at that moment, all I could see was you being this. What's the phrase parents use? I'm just as old as you now as when you were 10 or whatever. And so that was her idea. That was her thought process. But as she grew to understand some other things and to see some of the effects of this incident in my life, she was able to come back and say, I understand now, I was wrong. And we were able to have that conversation. And so, like I said, in the moment, you may not be able to move from what you think, from being right in your mind. But later on, if you're willing or as things happen, you're able to come back and say, you know what, I was wrong.
And I want to say to those of us who do try to have conversations with folks, once you realize that the person is not in a position to receive the conversation in a way that's going to move the conversation forward, that is going to be fruitful for the both of you, I do think it is important that we learn how to preserve our energy. Sometimes it's not worth the conversation. I do think it's worth it to put it on the table. I do think it's worth it to ask the question. I do think it's worth it to raise the issue, but I don't think it takes long for you to realize whether or not a person is able to have the conversation. And once you realize that, I think it's very important that you protect yourself and you just bow out of the conversation, and you can bow out with grace. Doesn't mean you have to leave the room, doesn't mean you have to leave the house, doesn't mean that you have to stop talking to the person. Just means that you have to realize that this conversation is not going to end well, and it doesn't bode well for anybody to keep going with it. And I think that's another thing that sometimes we try to do. We want to make a person see the error of our ways. We want to make the person see things from our perspective. And sometimes that's just not going to happen, and it's okay. And so sometimes we have to say it's just not worth it to keep going with the conversation.
Yeah. I agree. Sometimes that it's going to be some conversations that in that moment at that time, and I think that's another thing that was the beauty of what was happening in my house last night, is that you had all these different personalities, you had all these different people, you had all these different experiences, and it was almost like, and as the conversation started to evolve, you were like, in your mind, I was like in my mind, okay, all right, who I'm gonna have to check, who I'm gonna have to, chill out. But it didn't happen. It was just one of those moments, one of those experiences where everybody was willing and willing to open up. And I think it started with my aunt and how she sat in the middle of everyone and started talking about certain things and started admitting certain things and started opening up. And I think at that moment, it relaxed everybody to the point, they're like, you know what, man, if my aunt is talking about this, if my aunt is opening up about this, maybe this is a space where I can open up about it. Well, and there were some things that were shared between cousins that other cousins had did. The other cousins had, had, I said did or wrong, where they were able to say, yeah, you know what, man, I apologize for that. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know. And so, like I said, that was the beauty of it. But it won't happen if you're not willing to create a space for it to happen. It won't happen if you're not willing to have the dialogue. And it won't happen if you're not willing to admit some things. And like I said when I started, it doesn't matter. And I do agree with you with Denise. It doesn't matter. Me, it's, whether it's Thanksgiving, whether it's, Christmas, whether it's, whatever, whether it's Sunday dinner, like on soul food, it does not matter to me where these conversations take place. If you can take advantage of an opportunity for these conversations to take place, then take advantage of these. It doesn't necessarily have to be that we're going to have this conversation every Thanksgiving. No, it could be, hey, here's Friday night conversation night where you meet at someone's house, or you meet somewhere. You can, we go into the boat, whatever you decide to do. But as long as you start having a conversation, and that's something that one of my nieces said. So why don't we start, I think she said Saturday night conversation. And I thought that was awesome. And it just reminded me of when T and me started coffee and conversation on Tuesday mornings, which opened the door for me to have these conversations with her about so many different ideas, so many different things. And so that was something that was proposed last night. And like I said, I'm looking forward to how these conversations are going to evolve more today. I think everybody was excited, and and some of the comments, the number one comment was, "Man, I can't wait till tomorrow. If it's this good tonight, I can't wait till tomorrow." So.
Let me get this last comment in before we go. Raman says, slander is often used as an excuse to abuse Black people worldwide. Let me say that again. Slander is often used as an excuse to abuse Black people worldwide. I'm not sure what motivated this statement, but if it is because I said that I believe that the majority of us as Black folks, it's almost cultural for there to be violence in our home. And if you are relating that to slander, I do want to respond to that. I'm not sure that that's what motivated you to say that, but just in case it is, I do think that it is important for us as Black folks, as a Black collective, to think about the direct link from the system of chattel enslavement to violence in our home. And so not every Black person, of course, there are no absolutes. So I agree with you that Black people are not a monolith, but it is absolutely imperative that we as Black people think about the fact that there is violence in plenty of our homes, and it is a direct correlation to the violence that was perpetrated upon us when we were enslaved as a people, and that we still carry in ourselves.
Okay, so enjoy the rest of your day. Hope you have fun. Hope you enjoy. Hope my hope is that you spend time with your family in fruitful conversations, or conversations and dialogue that will help move your family forward. So any last words, Denise? Okay. Like I said, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for listening. Peace out.
Bye.
Thank you.